The moment Maya stepped into the little coastal cafe that morning, something in the air shifted. She didn't know why at first. She only felt a quiet awareness, almost like someone had turned toward her before she even crossed the threshold. She brushed it off. It had been a long week, and she was running on too little sleep and too much worry. But still, that feeling lingered. Soft. Persistent. The place was warm and bright, filled with the smell of cinnamon and roasted beans. Locals murmured over pastries, and outside, the gentle breath of the ocean moved across the windows. Maya ordered her usual drink and took a seat near the corner window. It was the same spot she chose every morning, more out of habit than intention. She pulled out her planner, trying to organize the day ahead. Her life felt like a puzzle lately, too many pieces, not enough edges. While she tapped her pen lightly against the page, she sensed eyes on her again. Not in a threatening way. Nothing sharp or uncomfortable. More like a quiet curiosity drifting across the room. She finally glanced up. That was when she saw him. He sat near the counter, halfway through a cup of something steaming, his hands wrapped loosely around the mug. His expression was thoughtful, calm, almost gentle in the way he observed the world. And he was looking at her. Not staring. Not intruding. Just noticing. She looked away quickly, pretending to read a note in her planner. Her heart ticked a little faster, as if it had bumped into something unexpected. When she gathered enough courage to look again, he wasn't watching her anymore. He was studying the foam in his cup, a soft smile almost forming. Maya cleared her throat and tried to focus, but the quiet awareness kept returning, circling her thoughts like a question she wasn't ready to answer. She packed up her things a little earlier than usual. Something about the morning felt too new, too open, and she wasn't sure what to do with the feeling. As she stepped outside, the cool sea air touched her cheeks. She walked slowly down the sidewalk, trying to settle her thoughts. She didn't expect anyone to follow. But when she heard footsteps behind her, steady, polite, not rushed, she turned just enough to see the man from the cafe a short distance away. He wasn't acting strange. He wasn't moving toward her. Just walking the same direction. Maya scolded herself internally. She lived in a friendly coastal town where people frequently crossed paths. This wasn't unusual. She kept walking. When she reached the bookstore where she worked, she unlocked the door, stepped inside, and was greeted by the familiar scent of old paper and cedar shelves. The place felt like home, the kind of quiet space that held stories like the shelves held dust. She shook off the lingering feeling and went about her morning routine. Turning on the lights. Straightening displays. Opening the blinds to let the gentle gold of the morning through. Around late morning, the small bell above the door chimed. She expected a regular customer. Someone searching for a gift or a new weekend read. Instead, the man from the cafe stepped inside. He paused near the entrance as if making sure he wasn't being intrusive. Then he offered her a small nod, polite and almost shy. "Good morning," he said softly. Maya blinked, unsure why her stomach fluttered. "Good morning. Can I help you find something?" His eyes moved across the shelves, but only for a moment. Then they returned to her. "I think you can," he said. "Though I'm not entirely sure how to ask." She wasn't prepared for an answer like that. It wasn't flirtatious. It wasn't bold. It felt honest, in a quiet, steady way that caught her off guard. Before she could respond, he continued. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable earlier. At the cafe." His voice was warm and sincere. "I just noticed you seemed like you had a lot on your mind." She froze. He had been watching her. Not in a hidden way, in a human way. Like someone who recognized a feeling he once carried himself. Maya swallowed. "That's thoughtful of you to say." He nodded gently. "I'm Elias, by the way." She hesitated, then offered her name. "Maya." There was a short silence, the kind that didn't scratch or strain. The kind that simply existed, like a space waiting to be filled. Elias shifted his weight lightly. "Would it be strange if I asked how your morning is going now?" Maya wasn't sure why such a simple question warmed her chest. But it did. And before she could answer, the bell on the door chimed again, a customer entering behind him. Elias stepped aside, giving her a soft, almost hopeful smile. "I can come back," he said. "If that's all right." Maya nodded before she even realized she was doing it. As he walked out, she watched him pause on the sidewalk, glancing back with a quiet expression she couldn't quite decode. And something inside her whispered that this was only the beginning. If you're enjoying this story so far, please like the video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. The moment she stepped back behind the counter, her pulse was still fluttering in a way she couldn't explain, and she wondered what Elias would say if he returned. Maya spent the rest of the morning pretending she wasn't waiting for the door to open again. She helped customers find travel guides, recommended a gentle romance novel to an older woman passing through town, and restocked a shelf that had been leaning a little too tiredly for weeks. But beneath all that, a quiet question pulsed through her thoughts. Would Elias really come back? And why did she care so much if he did? She kept glancing toward the windows, each time telling herself it was only to check the weather. But the weather hadn't changed. It was the same soft, blue-skied morning the town always wore like a comfortable sweater. Around midday, she finally stopped pretending. She was waiting for him. And that realization made her heart stretch in ways she hadn't expected. When the bell above the door finally chimed again, her breath caught for a moment. But it wasn't Elias. It was Mr. Lang, an older gentleman who always came in asking for history books and stories about ships. He greeted her warmly and moved straight to his usual section. Maya let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. She told herself she needed to focus. She didn't know Elias. He didn't know her. For all she knew, he had only wanted a book recommendation and nothing more. She placed a stack of newly arrived novels on the counter, organizing them one by one. Their spines were crisp, their pages smelling like fresh beginnings. She found comfort in that. Stories always gave her something steady to lean on. Half an hour passed. Then a full hour. And still no sign of him. Maya tried to shake it off. People walked in and out all day. Elias had no reason to return just because he said he might. But the thing that unsettled her most was the feeling she'd had earlier that he saw something in her morning that she hadn't even recognized herself. She wondered what made him notice. And why his presence felt strangely familiar, even though they had just met. By mid-afternoon, she stepped outside for a moment to breathe in the salt air. She leaned against the railing near the entrance, watching the slow rhythm of the town. The ocean was calm today, small waves folding over each other like the edges of a blanket. People wandered the boardwalk. A couple strolled by sharing a pastry. Someone laughed in the distance. Then she saw him. Elias stood across the street, hands in his pockets, looking at a small display in the window of an art shop. He didn't seem aware she was outside. He looked peaceful in a quiet, internal way, the kind of peacefulness people carried when they'd walked through storms and learned how to breathe afterward. For a moment, she wondered if she should call out to him. But before she could decide, an older man with a dog approached him, saying something with a friendly gesture. Elias crouched to pet the dog, listening with an attentive smile. There was something gentle about him. Not soft in a way that bent too easily, soft in a way that knew how to hold space for others. Maya stepped back inside before she could overthink it. A few minutes later, the bell chimed again. She didn't have to look up to know it was him. Something in the air shifted again, the same way it had at the cafe. Elias walked toward the counter, stopping a polite distance away. "I hope it's not too soon to say I'm back," he said, voice warm with a hint of humor. She felt a smile bloom, not forced, not polite, just honest. "You didn't have to hurry," she said. "Bookstores tend to stay in the same place." He laughed softly. "I figured as much. But I was hoping you'd be here." Those words were simple, but they touched something inside her, something that had been quiet for a long time. He glanced around the shop. "It's peaceful here," he said. "Feels like the kind of place where people slow down enough to actually breathe." "Maybe that's why I like it," she replied. Elias nodded, then hesitated. "I wanted to ask," he said slowly, "are you all right today? You seemed a little weighed down earlier." "I didn't want to assume anything." Maya paused. It had been a long time since someone asked her that without expecting anything in return. Most people asked out of courtesy. Elias asked like he genuinely wanted to know. I've just had a lot on my mind, she said. Nothing dramatic. Just life. He studied her expression with a calm, thoughtful patience that made her feel unexpectedly safe. If you ever feel like talking about it, he said, I'm a good listener. Not that you owe me your thoughts. He stopped, searching for the right words. I noticed something familiar in the way you were sitting this morning. Like you were trying to organize 100 things at once and only had a few quiet minutes to do it. Maya blinked. That was exactly how her morning had felt. She hadn't realized anyone could read it so clearly. How did you see that? She asked softly. He looked down for a moment, then back at her. Because that used to be me, he said. For a long time. Before she could ask more, the front door opened again, a small rush of cool air swirling in. A young delivery driver stepped inside, carrying a box clearly addressed to the shop. Maya moved to sign for it, but her heart was still caught on Elias's words. For a brief moment, she wondered what story he wasn't telling, and whether she was ready to hear it. When she turned back, Elias was waiting with an expression she couldn't quite read, something between hope and hesitation. And the room suddenly felt different again, as if the next moment might change something she didn't yet understand. Maya set the delivery box on the counter, but her focus kept drifting back to Elias. He stood there with that quiet steadiness again, hands loosely at his sides, as if he wasn't in any hurry to leave. As if he had all the time in the world to simply stay in the moment with her. It made her chest feel warm in a slow, careful way, like something waking up after being asleep for too long. She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear and cleared her throat. You said that used to be you, she said gently. The feeling of trying to carry too much. What did you mean? Elias didn't answer at first. He glanced around the shop, as though making sure the space was settled before sharing something delicate. Life has seasons, he said finally. Some feel like sunlight. Some feel like fog. And there was a long stretch where my days felt heavier than they should. Maya nodded, encouraging him to go on without pushing. He continued, voice calm but lined with honesty. It wasn't one big thing. Just little pieces piling up. Expectations from others. A job that felt like it was draining color from everything. The sense that I was moving, but not toward anything that mattered. Maya understood that more deeply than she expected. It's strange, she said quietly, how we sometimes realize we're exhausted only after someone else points it out. Elias offered a small, grateful smile. Exactly, he said. I think that's what I recognized in you this morning. Not sadness. Not fear. Just someone who's been carrying more than she admits. She looked down at her hands for a moment. He wasn't wrong. And she didn't feel exposed, just seen in a way that felt surprisingly gentle. She opened the delivery box to steady her thoughts, pulling out new journals wrapped in brown paper. They had simple covers, the kind people used when trying to understand themselves through written words. Elias picked one up carefully. You like these? He asked. They're some of my favorites, she replied. People buy them when they're ready to tell themselves the truth. He ran a thumb along the binding. I used one like this a few years ago. It helped more than I expected. He paused, then added, even the messy pages. Maya smiled softly. I like messy pages, she said. They mean someone is trying. For a moment, they both stood there quietly, the afternoon sunlight drifting through the windows like a slow-moving tide. Finally, Elias set the journal down. Would you? He hesitated. Would you like to get a cup of tea when you close today? Only if you're comfortable. I know we just met, but you seem like someone I'd like to know beyond borrowed pages. Her heart skipped, not dramatically, just a small, startled flutter. No one had asked her that in a long time. Not with sincerity. Not with the kind of patience that let her say no without awkwardness. She opened her mouth, but before she could respond, a voice called her name from the front door. It was Mrs. Harland, the older woman who owned the florist shop 2 doors down. She stepped inside, arms full of a bouquet large enough to swallow her whole. Maya, dear, these arrived early, she said. Thought you might like first pick before I set them out. Maya blinked in surprise. The flowers were bright, full of life, soft yellows, deep greens, vibrant whites. They smelled like fresh mornings and new beginnings. "Oh, they're beautiful," Maya said, moving toward her. "Thank you." Mrs. Harland gave a knowing little smile, the kind she often wore when she sensed a story she wasn't being told. "I'll leave them here," she said lightly. "You two carry on." She gave a small wave and slipped back out the door, leaving a trail of floral perfume in her wake. Elias let out a quiet breath, amused. "She seems nice." "She is," Maya replied. "But she notices everything." His eyebrows lifted. "Everything?" "Everything," she repeated with a slight laugh. "You can't stand next to someone for 2 minutes without her assuming you've known each other for years." Elias smiled, a little shyly this time. "Maybe she's not wrong," he said. Maya felt her pulse quicken softly, not in panic, but in something calmer. Something hopeful. She looked at him, really looked at him, noticing the steady warmth in his expression, the sincerity in his posture, the way he seemed to listen even before she spoke. "I would like tea," she said finally. "Not because I feel pressured. Just because. I want to." Elias's expression softened with relief. "Then I'd be honored." But before either of them could say more, a sudden gust of wind rattled the windows. The soft sky outside had shifted. Clouds gathered over the ocean, rolling in quicker than expected. Maya stepped closer to the window. "That storm came out of nowhere," she murmured. And she wasn't only talking about the weather. Something had shifted between them, not loudly, but unmistakably. Something that felt like the beginning of a new chapter she hadn't planned for. Elias moved beside her, watching the darkening sky. "Maya," he said quietly, "there's something I should tell you before this day moves any further." She turned to him slowly, heart tightening with curiosity and worry. His expression held a truth he hadn't shared yet. A truth that might change everything. The wind pushed harder against the windows, and the sky dimmed as though someone were slowly lowering the lights on the town. Maya stood beside Elias, steadying her breath without meaning to. There was something in his expression that asked her to listen closely, something careful, something weighted, something he clearly hadn't expected to say this soon. She folded her hands together. "What is it?" she asked gently. Elias took a slow breath, the kind people take when they're about to be honest in a way that makes them vulnerable. "When I said I used to carry a lot," he began softly, "that wasn't the whole truth." Maya nodded, urging him on without interrupting. "I didn't just feel overwhelmed," he said. "I reached a point where I lost myself in it. I was working long hours, ignoring things I should have been paying attention to. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I stopped noticing the people around me, including someone who mattered." He wasn't shaking, but his voice carried the faint tremor of regret. "One afternoon," he continued, "a friend told me, 'You miss the world even when you're standing right in front of it.' That stuck with me." Maya listened carefully, her heart softening around the edges. "What changed?" she asked. He exhaled through his nose, not in frustration, just in honesty. "I realized I didn't want that to be my life anymore. I took a break. A long one. I left the city, let go of a job that exhausted me, and came here for a while. Not to run away, but to finally breathe." The storm outside crackled faintly, a reminder of the world shifting. Maya didn't speak right away. She recognized the kind of courage it took to say those words. "I'm glad you gave yourself room to heal," she said softly. He looked at her then, not with embarrassment, but with quiet sincerity. "I'm telling you this because, when I saw you this morning, sitting alone with your thoughts, I recognized a feeling I once carried. I wasn't trying to pry or make assumptions. I just..." He paused, searching for the right words. "I didn't want to watch someone else slowly fade the way I almost did." Maya lowered her gaze. His words touched a part of her she kept hidden under layers of routine, responsibility, and quiet exhaustion she rarely named out loud. "I didn't realize anyone could see that," she whispered. He offered a gentle smile. "That's the thing. People rarely see themselves clearly when they're weary. But it doesn't make the tiredness any less real." She felt her throat tighten, not with sadness, but with something gently overwhelming, the feeling of being understood without having to explain every detail. Elias stepped back slightly, giving her space. I hope I didn't overstep, he added. I just care more than I expected to this soon. The honesty in that admission made her heartbeat echo against her ribcage in a steady, startled rhythm. You didn't overstep, she said. You shared something honest. That matters. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Rain began tapping softly against the storefront windows, drawing delicate patterns on the glass. Maya leaned a little closer to the window. That storm is going to be strong, she murmured. Elias nodded. I can stay until it settles. If you want the company. She glanced at him, surprised by how natural that felt. That would be nice, she admitted. He took a seat on one of the stools near the counter. Maya joined him, leaving just enough space between them to feel comfortable, but not distant. Outside, the rain thickened into a steady curtain. Inside, the shop felt smaller in a comforting way, like the world had shrunk down to a warm little pocket just for the two of them. Elias watched the rain for a moment before speaking again. You remind me of someone I cared about, he said softly. Not because you look alike, but because you both carry your emotions quietly and try to take care of everyone before thinking about yourselves. Maya tilted her head. Who was she? He sighed gently. My sister. A warmth spread through Maya's chest. She hadn't expected that. She taught me a lot, he said. Especially how to see people beyond their polite answers. Maya looked down at her hands. Is she still here? He nodded. She lives a few towns over now. Doing well. Happier than she used to be. I learned from her journey too. Maya felt something inside her loosen, a knot she hadn't realized had been holding so tightly. I'm glad you told me, she said. It makes sense now. Why you notice things most people overlook. Elias gave a quiet, thoughtful smile. Sometimes, he said, you learn to pay attention because you know what it feels like when no one does. The lights flickered for a moment as the storm intensified. A brief hush settled between them, soft and full. Maya opened her mouth to say something, but a loud crash echoed outside, not dangerous, but surprising. She rushed to the window. A large wooden sign from the cafe next door had blown over, skidding across the boardwalk. The storm wasn't gentle anymore. She turned back to Elias, who was already standing, ready to help if she needed anything. Maya, he said quietly, there's something else I haven't told you. Her pulse quickened again, that same feeling of standing on the edge of something she didn't yet understand. Elias looked at her with an expression that held both truth and fear. The real reason I noticed you this morning is because I saw you before that. Her breath caught. Before, she repeated. Where? He swallowed, hesitating, not because he wanted to hide something, but because he wanted to say it right. I didn't realize how closely I'd been watching you, he said softly, until today made me admit it. And in that moment, Maya's world shifted. Again. The storm pressed against the shop like a restless tide. Rain streaked the windows in fast, heavy lines. The wind kept testing the old wooden frame, shaking it just slightly each time, as if reminding them the world outside was shifting faster than either of them expected. Inside, the air felt still. Maya stood frozen, her breath caught somewhere between curiosity and concern. Elias looked at her with an expression that wasn't frightening or intrusive, just deeply honest, as though he had reached the moment where holding back would only create distance instead of clarity. She steadied herself. What do you mean you saw me before today? She asked, voice soft but steady. Elias rubbed the back of his neck, searching for the right words. The first time I noticed you, he said, was a few weeks ago. Not in the cafe. Not in here. He glanced toward the window, watching the water run in rivers down the glass. It was early morning, he continued. I was walking along the boardwalk, clearing my head. And I saw you sitting by the railing near the water. You were writing in a small notebook. Completely absorbed in whatever you were thinking. Maya blinked, surprised. She remembered those mornings clearly, the ones where she had woken up before sunrise because her thoughts felt too heavy to sleep through. She would sit by the water, writing everything she couldn't say out loud. She never thought anyone had paid attention. You didn't approach me, she said quietly. No, Elias replied. I didn't want to interrupt you. You looked peaceful, but in a fragile way. Like someone trying to breathe on her own terms. Maya felt emotion tighten gently in her chest. She didn't know why the idea of him noticing her back then made her heart warm in such a careful way. "How many times did you see me?" she asked. "A handful," he said honestly. "Not every day. I didn't follow you or anything like that. I just happened to be there on the same mornings. And every time, you looked like someone who was trying to put her world back together in quiet ways." His words didn't feel invasive. They felt like someone admitting they had seen a stranger's vulnerability and chosen to respect it. Maya lowered her gaze for a moment. "I didn't realize anyone noticed me back then," she whispered. "Most people wouldn't have," Elias said gently. "But I recognized something familiar in you. Something I used to feel myself." She looked up. "And today made you decide to tell me?" He nodded. "I didn't want to pretend our paths crossed by accident. Life rarely works that neatly. I wanted you to know that when I asked if you were all right, it wasn't random kindness. I asked because I've seen the quiet way you carry things." Maya breathed out slowly, the truth settling around her like soft light. "I'm not upset," she said. "Just surprised." Elias exhaled in relief. "I was afraid it would come across the wrong way." "It didn't," she assured him. "You weren't watching me to judge me. You were noticing. And that's different." The tension eased from his shoulders. They both fell into a quiet moment, listening to the storm rumbling like distant drums. Maya finally spoke again. "Those mornings by the water. I was trying to figure out what direction my life was heading. I felt like I was drifting without meaning to. I didn't know how to fix it." Elias nodded with understanding. "I think a lot of us arrive at that point before anything changes." She smiled gently. "And maybe that's why I wasn't as startled by you today as I thought I would be." Elias tilted his head slightly. "What do you mean?" "You walked in with the same kind of energy I've been trying to find again," she said. "A calm that comes after someone chooses themselves." A warmth spread through his expression. "I didn't expect you to say that," he admitted. "Well," she said lightly, "you weren't the only one paying attention." He let out a soft laugh, warm, genuine, like it rose from somewhere deep. Another gust of wind shook the door. The shop lights flickered again. Maya stepped closer to him, instinctively drawn to the steadiness he carried. "About that tea," she said. "We may not be going out in this weather." "I figured," he replied with a small smile. "But I can make a pretty good cup right here. My family swore I brewed tea like someone twice my age." She raised a brow, amused. "Oh, a tea expert?" "A humble one," he said. "But still an expert." She rolled her eyes playfully. "All right. The supplies are in the back." He followed her behind the small counter, where she kept an electric kettle and a box of assorted teas for long afternoons. The storm roared outside, but inside the shop, everything felt cocooned and warm. He brewed the tea with thoughtful patience, handing her a cup that smelled like citrus and comfort. As she wrapped her hands around the warmth, Elias leaned gently against the counter. "You know," he said softly, "I wasn't planning on staying in this town long." Maya's heart paused. "Weren't?" she repeated. "No," he said. "I thought this would be a temporary stop. A place to rest before moving on." She swallowed. "And now?" He looked at her, really looked, with a warmth that made the storm outside feel distant and unimportant. "Now," he said quietly, "I'm not sure leaving makes sense anymore." The words settled between them like a promise not yet spoken fully. Maya felt a slow, steady warmth bloom in her chest. "Elias," she whispered, "why does that mean so much to me?" He smiled, a little uncertain and a little hopeful. "Maybe because we're both finding pieces of ourselves again," he said. "And maybe we found them in each other." The storm outside rolled on. Inside, something gentler formed, something patient, something warm, something new. Maya took a breath, feeling the truth of the moment settle deep inside her. "I didn't realize how closely you'd been watching me," she said with a soft, emotional steadiness. "But I'm glad you did." Elias's eyes softened, filled with quiet relief. "So am I," he whispered. And in the warm glow of the little bookstore, with the world softened by rain and truth, their story settled into something real. Something beginning. Something that felt like hope.